I think maybe we have enough people to start. It's 8:35 here in California, so good time to start. Hey, welcome. Let's see if I can pronounce all the names. Peshma, Mark, Dina, Cindy, Shri, and Bharat. And Dila. Welcome aboard, everyone. And I think you all probably have seen my advertisement. We have Sri Ganesan here. He's really one of the top experts in the world on the topic of customer onboarding and how to set your customers up for a successful journey. He talked to more companies about this than anyone else alive, essentially. So I'm really excited to hear from Shri about his top tips for successful onboarding and setting up for low churn and high lifetime value.
Thank you so much, Gwen. I wouldn't agree that I'm like the top expert in anything, but I have been speaking to quite a few real experts over the last year and a half and sort of accumulated all their ideas to then position myself as an expert, right? So that's what this is about. And folks, thanks for joining. And just a quick, to understand around the room, how many people are from like a SaaS or like B2B product background? Okay, you can use the reactions to raise your hands, perhaps. All right.
You just have to remember to bring down your hands.
Yeah. Perfect. So the reason I asked is often when we say customer onboarding, there's also user onboarding, which people mistake one for the other, while like user onboarding is more about an individual user who's not accustomed to a new system or new process. How do we bring them on board and get them comfortable with the product? Versus customer onboarding, what we're talking about here is like you're selling a solution to a mid-market or enterprise company, and there's this whole dance between the two companies before you actually start delivering value to your customer, right? So there's a kickoff meeting, there is like a set of activities both people need to do. There's planning, there's configurations, integrations, migration, testing, training, and then go live. And hopefully after that, there is some value delivered. So that's the onboarding that we are going to talk about today. And I have a presentation I'm going to walk you through. Oops, I think Gwen, you need to give me access to share my screen.
One sec, I'm trying to figure out how to give you access to share screen.
Meanwhile, quick poll, what comes to your mind when we talk about customer onboarding? You can just maybe type in answers in the chat.
Sure, I think I gave you host access, which should allow you to share.
Let me correct that. What sort of emotion or analogy or like what sort of sentiment comes to your mind when we talk about customer onboarding? I think Matt says pre-sales, solutioning, dealing with ambiguity, requirements mapping, right? Post sales, yes, of course. Yet another account team, sure. Slow, absolutely. That I can definitely relate to. All right, so I can now share my screen. Thanks, folks, for giving your quick answers there. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. So I'm going to first start with what what's resonated most with me when you say customer onboarding. One is it's something that feels very hit or miss, right? So as a business, it's pretty much the first partnership that your customer is experiencing with you. But very often, like probably 3 out of 5 times, you're not doing a great job in most companies, right? So that's a hit or miss experience that we end up delivering to customers during that critical onboarding journey. The next sort of thing for me, the mental image that comes when I think customer onboarding is like a slow crash, right? So it's like, you're headed straight into a wall. You're very close, but there's no way you can change the course. It's too late usually, right? So it's like you're going towards an accident. You know that, okay, we are going to miss our deadline. Things haven't happened in time, but there's only so much you can do about it because there's so many people involved, which is why it also feels like a Jenga game at times, right? It's like so many moving parts, moving pieces. Different people need to carefully move their pieces for things not to fall apart. And so this is sort of the images that come to my mind when we think of customer onboarding. So going back to what your first, like if you've been part of a journey where a product was very early stage, immature, and you sort of started onboarding your first large customers, go back to think about what that felt like, right? Firstly, it would have been super reactive, right? So we wouldn't have planned out things. We would like be making up our methodology as we go. New roadblocks every now and then you figure out, okay, how do we solve this? And hence it's you don't even know when this process is going to end. When you walk in as an entrepreneur, usually like are like early team member in a SaaS product, you think it's going to be a cakewalk. You've probably done it with a few SMB customers before, but when you go into your first big customer, that's when you start facing, okay, there is an infosec thing that needs to be handled. Or there's also this sort of 3 new integration requirements that we've never faced before. And all of that starts eating into like your mind share, causing stress because these are things you haven't done before, right? And then over a period of time, you start feeling that, hey, this is getting better, right? It's like you started creating this checklist, probably on a spreadsheet or like a Trello board. And with every new go live that you're doing with a customer, you're adding to that spreadsheet. You're feeling more confident that, okay, I've tackled all of these things before, and I know that these are the sequence of things we need to do for every new customer. But there's the truth is, how much ever you improve your checklist, that's just one dimension, and there's usually room for improvement across more dimensions when it comes to onboarding, right? So if we keep polishing our checklist, adding more items to it, making more subtasks, and sort of create like an elaborate project plan, that's one way for you to improve upon what you're doing in your onboarding. But that's only going to take you to like a local maxima, right? And beyond a point, making more changes to that onboarding plan and steps, it's only going to take you here. The truth is, most of us don't know what this true north or like a real global maxima feels like, because you're not considering all of the other areas where we can actually improve our experience, improve our processes, methodology. And that's one of the key takeaways that I've had over the last year, that a post-sale implementation or onboarding organization needs to level up on many dimensions, right? It's not just your checklist. You need to figure out how to make your customers more accountable in the journey. You need to figure out what new tactics you can employ in order to like get rid of scope creep, to make sure that you're going to like deliver that first value faster. How do you manage expectations with the customer the right way? How do you sort of do a better kickoff so that first experience the customer has is better? How do you sort of set the rules of engagement during this process to ensure that things are going to go smooth, and if something goes haywire, how to handle it? So these are all areas where we need to be intentional about what we're doing and carefully figure out how to level up on each of them. So my biggest learning in the last year and a half has been that what we read online as tips for onboarding and how to run a better implementation, that usually makes up just 5% of what you need to know to actually do that job better. And people who have been there and done that time and again, they all have their own like tactics in their mind. They have their own sort of playbooks that they've formed, and they're not like going out and publishing it somewhere. So that tacit knowledge is what I've been trying to tap into over the last year and a half. And from those conversations I've had, I've sort of distilled out 6 ideas for today. The goal over here of or how I identified which 6 ideas to bring up was, you shouldn't walk away from this conversation thinking, hey, okay, those were nice ideas, but it's not practical for me, right? Each of the ideas we're going to chat about are very simple ideas that you can bring into action tomorrow in your organization, right? And hopefully that will still have high impact for you. So that's the sort of goal over here. Some of these may be familiar with you already, but we're not trying to invent new things. It's more of what we've heard from others. How do we make sure that everyone's aware of these great ideas that do make a difference? I'll start over here with our 6 ideas. Is the first idea, right? So it's about your kickoff meeting, and how do you sort of have 2 very purposeful questions in your kickoff that's going to ensure a smoother ride through the rest of the journey. So a lot of onboarding problems arise from someone dropping the ball somewhere, and then if you're like an implementation manager or engagement manager looking at the project overall, you have this concern of, okay, you know what, the customer side, this person needs to do this, this architect needs to get back with like an approval on our solution, but they haven't done it yet, and it's been 2 days past what we had decided as when this is going to happen. And guess what, I can write a mail to the customer, keeping this person in the to and like their boss in CC. But should I do that now? Is it too early to escalate? So these are things that stop us from making progress. So one of the ideas was to actually say, at your kickoff meeting, ask a question to the customer. Hey, you know what? This is our plan. This is where I need your people, right? So in week 2, we need your solution architect. In week 3, we need your QA folks to be involved to test this out. And this is the plan. And this is how in 6 weeks, we're going to get you to see value. But what should we do if your team doesn't respond in time, right? So just ask that question, and the key stakeholder on the customer side is going to say, they're going to give you the permission to sort of chase their team down, right? And once that happens, you don't need to think twice about shooting off that mail immediately saying, hey, we needed to have gotten this done by yesterday. We're still overdue on this. Can we get this done today? You're not thinking about being rude, or is it okay for me to follow up so quickly, because you've established the protocol, right? So it's important to ask for that permission in that first meeting and establish protocol around it. Make it clear that, okay, you guys told me it's okay for me to chase you down, so I'm going to do that. If you don't do something in time, I'm going to shoot out a mail to all of you in this group so that we can figure out the next course of action to bring the plan back on track. The other question is just about resourcing, right? Often you go into a project saying, hey, okay, customer wants to buy this solution. And then you hear that the people who are supposed to be involved are stuck in a different project. They aren't yet freed up, right? So essentially, buy-in on resources is another question you can have addressed as part of the kickoff meeting, right? So this is when we need your people. Make sure that they're available, and let's sort of shake hands on the plan. So it may not happen at the kickoff, but ask the question, follow up, and get closure on that plan. So that's really idea number 1. No tools needed. This is just about you asking a couple of questions. Idea 2, and this is something I learned from a company called Pando. So in most of our sort of onboarding and implementation projects, the customer gives you like this thing saying, hey, you know what, we need these success criteria to be fulfilled for us to say that we have successfully implemented your solution and we're getting value out of it, right? So they define that success criteria, maybe along with you. But then the onus of those success criteria falls squarely on your team typically, right? And I believe that's a mistake. And what Pando, for example, did was they said, hey, it can't be that just my team is responsible for the success criteria. You are in this is a partnership, right? So I want to see that your team also acknowledges that this is the success criteria that we are jointly working towards. So go to that exec on the customer side and say, you're the exec sponsor, you want this to succeed, then let's have goals set for your team based on the success criteria as well, right? For example, adoption is a huge issue in any sort of new product being introduced. Change management is an issue. And it can't be that the customer is just blaming the vendor and saying, hey, you know what? No one adopted your product, so we're not going to renew after this year. It's a failure, right? Instead, they need to be thinking alongside you about how do I get my team to adopt this better. And it's not just about like wishing that it happens. It's about saying, hey, your goal as a manager in whatever, let's say it's a support team buying new software. Your goal as a support manager is to ensure adoption of the product by the team, right? And that's your KRA for this quarter, right? So it's sort of ensure that there is actual goal alignment happening, which is going to help your product succeed. And someone's bonus is on the line at the customer end if your success criteria are not met. So that's truly about aligning organization to ensure that this can happen, right? So otherwise people are going to be casual about it. It's not their job. They feel it's your job to do it. Everyone wants it to succeed, but something is not on the line for them, and that's what needs to change, right? So a great example was how a customer of Pando, after this happened, came up with a gamification idea for adoption, right? So they said, hey, okay, before we actually go live, let's have a contest within the team and see how many people are able to do maximum number of activities using the new product as sort of game, and then they have had awards around it and so on. So what that did was ensure that people got familiar with the product, understood the value of the product through that exercise, and adoption happened. So that's the second idea. So the third idea is what I call workshops versus homework. And this is a lesson I've learned the hard way myself. So here's a scenario that some of you may be familiar with. You go on like these onboarding calls every week with a customer. And week 2, you've given them a bunch of things that they need to do, a bunch of things that you need to do. And week 3, you come back to the call hoping that they've sort of finished at least 80% of what they were supposed to do. And they're going to say, something else came up. I was on customer calls. We had an escalation. There was a fire. We couldn't do what we needed to do, right? And you're still at the same point from the customer's perspective. Now, the way we have understood we can solve this, and my product is in the customer onboarding space itself. So customers of ours, for example, are people who are on implementation and onboarding projects, and they're busy day in and day out, right? So they're on customer calls all the time, are doing some implementation work, following up with so many teams internally. So for them to, for example, create a template and try out my product, the time is never right. And likewise for everyone, like implementing your solution or doing those tasks may be an extra task that's come their way in addition to the daily work that they're doing. So what we realized is, if instead of giving that as almost like homework to them, saying, hey, finish this before the next week, if you do it as a workshop together, right? So you say, okay, let's put time on your calendar, and we're also going to be there, and we're going to do this configuration together, right? Or we're going to do this setup together. So then it becomes a forcing function to ensure that things get done in time. So you sort of go to that meeting, you're working on it alongside the customer. Maybe they don't need your help, but you're there because you put it on their calendar and they're doing the work. And if they have a doubt, you can answer it, or you can even help them through that process. And you can give them a recording of what happened, so that if in the future they need to do it again, they're already familiar. They can refer back to this, how that configuration happened, or how a template was put together, or whatever, right? So that's idea number 3, which is about saying, do more together, leave less for like the customer to do it on their own and come back, just to keep things on track. And Gainsight, who's like the pioneer in customer success, they adopted this methodology for all of their basic configuration, and they saw like a 67% reduction in the time to go live after they changed from like the do it yourself to the workshop model. The next idea is about designing adaptive journeys for your customers, right? And I don't mean this in a very elaborate way, but basically segment your users based on their maturity and design a process for them accordingly. I'll give you an example. Maybe like chatbots are an easy sort of example to understand. So let's say there's a customer who wants to use a chatbot for generating leads on their website. So anyone visiting the website, they want to capture information using a chatbot. Now, they're moving from no chatbot to chatbot, right? So that is level 0 to level 1, let's say. And there's another customer who maybe was using a different tool, a different chatbot, and is now hoping to adopt your solution because you have better sync with their CRM and a better sort of integration with Slack, and that's what their team wants. Now, that is probably a level 1 to level 2, right? And then there's some other company which says, hey, you know what? I need, I do these ABM, like account-based marketing campaigns. And so my chatbot needs to be aware of which accounts we are targeting and have different answers to questions, or like ask different questions to customers who are targeted by a company when they visit our website, right? So that is probably a level 4 to level 5 for the chatbot, implementation. Now, what the mistake that most of us make is, if I'm the chatbot company and I support ABM, in my mind, that's like the USP for my product. And I'm like, how do I get everyone to level 5, right? And when we try to do that, you're setting yourself up for failure, because the customer at level 0 has so much to do to get to level 5 that it's not going to be an easy implementation. It's too much change happening in one shot. So it's either going to be like a very long project that never ends, or you're going to keep facing new bottlenecks as you go through that journey. So the idea should be to move from level 0 to level 1 to level 2 to level 3 and so on, right? So the first value for the customer is to take them from 0 to 1 if they're at 0. If they're 2, take them from 2 to 3. So essentially have a maturity model, and it's not as complex as it sounds. It's just about understanding how you want to segment users and sort of identify the value at each maturity level, which is going to help the customer, right? And hence design your onboarding journey as a step-by-step approach rather than a all at once sort of model. The next idea is about engineering your adoption. And what I mean by this is adoption is not automatic. You can't wish it into happening. I did share that example of someone doing gamification around it. That's a good idea. But sometimes it's as simple as picking the right people for that first cohort of people who are going to experience your product. So when you're working with the stakeholders on the customer side and you're going to introduce a new product, often it's going to be like a staged rollout at the customer end, right? So they're going to say, hey, you know what? I'll first put this one team on your product and we'll sort of iron out all the kinks and then we'll roll it out to everyone. And a good example for this could be like a CRM or some other like major system changing, where you want to ensure that people are comfortable with the way of working, nothing is missed, all the integrations are working fine, etc. And if you put the wrong people in that first cohort, they're going to come back only with like negative things to say. They're going to focus on what's not working, and it's going to sort of stall the process, not going to help you move ahead faster. So picking people with a growth mentality, picking people who are sort of those early adopters, have the curiosity, appreciate like the good things about a new product. Those are the folks you want your customer to handpick for that first cohort. And they're going to put up with minor inconveniences or changes in the way they need to do things, because they will see the bigger benefit from your product, right? So they understand why this is happening, and they're going to adopt accordingly. A good example for this was Facebook, right? So when Facebook did this workplace product and started going to large enterprises saying, hey, you know what, everyone knows Facebook, but inside your office as well, like you can have your communication happen instead of like Yammer or something, use Facebook workplace, right? What they did was they would work with the IT team, HR team to identify who are those people in the company who are most, socially present in different platforms, who they can bring into their fold, bring them as early adopters so that they start posting a lot of content in this platform. So when the rest of the folks come in, it already looks active, right? So there's already something happening. It's a simple enough idea, but if you don't like plan it out and engineer it the right way, it could look like a ghost town when you introduce workplace, right? So you needed to seed the right people in first to ensure that it's a success within the company. This is the last idea I have for the day. It's about having a value delivery workshop with your customer. So the idea is, most often when we implement a new solution for our customer, we're happy we won this large customer, and we're like, okay, you know what, we went live with this customer, we've done it, we're all congratulating each other. And then marketing comes in and says, hey, you won this large logo, can I go and get a case study from them? Like, yes, of course, I'm sure they'll be happy to. Then you introduce marketing to the customer side execs, and no one knows what value came out of your solution. They have some vague ideas of, hey, we did this because it's like better usability, higher productivity. They're going to say some things, but then when it comes to, can we have some numbers? What's the ROI? Those are things which are not even discussed, because you know what? During the sales process, the salesperson pitched something, ROI was pitched, but then you're not been measuring the actual change that happened. You probably didn't even measure the pre and post, right? So how do you make that happen? Yes, you can have it as part of the process to measure like metrics pre and post and so on, but then often it's not going to happen unless there is some sort of a forcing function for it. And that's the idea over here, that after you go live, have a value delivery workshop session with the customer as part of your process, and commit to that value delivery workshop even when you're selling, right? So now what's going to happen is your post-sale organization knows that you need to showcase that value, that you need to, talk about numbers in that value delivery workshop, which means you need to have collected the numbers early on. So for example, if it's a chatbot and you're saying, hey, my chatbot can, answer 60% of all the questions that are coming in, then you need to know how many questions came in before, how many got answered by humans, how much time did it take. And now you're going to measure the post performance and say, okay, we used to have so many questions come in, which needed to be handled by humans. Now we have overall so many questions coming in, and what percentage is handled by the bot, and so on. This is like an easier example, but I'm sure there's enough scenarios we've all been in where we don't know the numbers, and it's not even possible to go back in time and find out what that improvement, what that delta change our product made. So having a value delivery workshop ensures that everyone knows I need to do that workshop. So I need to collect information upfront and do this the right way. So yes, that sort of brings us to a close. Here's like a quick recap of the 6 ideas. First one, very simply asking customers about, hey, can you commit your resources? What timeline can you commit them for? And get a sign off on it. Bring up the escalation protocol. Ensure that people know this is what's going to happen if you miss your deadlines. And I'm not going to feel bad chasing you down because your boss has said this is what I need to do, right? The next one is about making it a joint success instead of like success criteria just for you. Get the customer side to also own goals which impact their growth in their organization, right? The next one is about moving to more workshops rather than just giving tasks to the customer to complete at their own pace, to ensure that it's a forcing function for work to get done. The fourth idea is about having different variations in your playbook depending on maturity of the customer, setting different goals for each customer implementation based on their maturity, essentially. Right? The fifth one is about engineering adoption the right way, thinking about who are the first users to bring in for your tool or product to ensure that it's a positive trajectory from there. And the last one is about having a value workshop as a forcing function to ensure that you sort of collected the right inputs early on and keep measuring the ROI that's delivered. Cool. That's what I had for the day. Any comments, questions, other inputs? Maybe if there are other ideas, we can listen to them as well.
Yeah, I just have to say that for us, the Kafka journey, even though like Kafka got good adoption fairly early on, the idea of finding the right team with the right project and the right needs at the right time was basically always key. Like if you had people who could use Kafka and were set up to do it, then it was easy. And if there was no project that needed Kafka, it doesn't matter how much the CEO, CTO, CIO wanted, it's just not gonna happen. So for me, that was like the biggest.
Got it. Anyone else? Ideas? Matt? Ile?
I'm less involved in that part because I'm more on the engineering side. So I'm still trying to match what you have here with my experience. I do feel with my limited experience, I do feel all those are very valuable. But again, I'm very new to those things. So I'm learning here. But thanks for sharing. Great stuff.
Thank you. Bharat, you've been in quite a few implementations. Any of these things that you're already following, or any ideas which you think you can put into use?
Hey, hi, Sri. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We are following most of the ideas that you have mentioned, except the value delivery part. We don't have a proper structure as such, but this value delivery is something which we are working on it. But it will take some time for us to give a structure to that. Right. Apart from that, we do have all that adoptions, different playbooks, and that workshop method. We get into the workshop way of doing it if the customer is not doing things on their own. In the first couple of interactions, we realize that these persons are not partnering with us, and then we just go ahead and do it.
Got it. Cool. All right. Anyone else?
Hi, Sri.
Hey.
Thank you for sharing. I would love to actually go back to the slides, the summary slide that you had.
Sure.
Okay, the question is mainly like, as you plan, like, what your end vision is or what success means. Like, have you done intermittent phases, like, step one, phase one, success, like, the end state is always like, it takes time to get there. But what
Right.
about some intermediate states?
Yeah, I think first value delivered is like a big buzzword in customer success now, and the whole idea is don't wait for like the complete delivery to happen. How do you break the journey down into uh, ensuring that there is some early value delivered through that? The way you scope out the project should be, okay, can we already make life better for someone, or can we just start delivering some metrics to a leader before like everything else happens, so that you start seeing some value? There's like either like systematizing something, or it's like, oh, these two things needed to be done manually before, now you do it in one and it automatically happens in the other, right? So it could be simple things, but some delta improvement early on and then build upon it, rather than like go for the entire vision, has become the norm now in most like mid-market or enterprise implementations. And also I think measuring success along the way is another trend, where like you, instead of doing a NPS at the end of the whole journey, you can now do like a CSAT at every key milestone that you're accomplishing. It could even be, hey, we did our kickoff, rate the kickoff, right? How was the experience? So measuring things along the journey so that you know the customer sentiment as well. Are they getting frustrated about things, or is it all going smoothly? Is everyone happy about the progress?
Right. Yeah.
Just to add on to that, these days it has become more important to have progress before perfection. So progress is more important than perfection. This is what I think Christy, one of the customer success leaders on LinkedIn, says. People are focusing on progress rather than perfection. That's why we have all these metrics all along the implementation, where we are trying to explain the customer on the first value delivered and so on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what about like, first of all, as we try to onboard customers, it's also choosing your customers, right?
Right.
What some criteria used in selecting who your first customer is?
Yeah, I think defining the ICP and sort of validating the hypothesis around it is probably something that today most startups spend a lot of time on. It's become like, before you climb the peak, know which peak you're climbing, is what they say, right? So in that sense, I think people have started focusing a lot on what is that narrow ICP to start with first, because we all know that once we hit gold in one area, then expanding to more use cases is easier. I have a really good example. There's a company called Netomi in the chatbot space, and I was talking to the VP customer success over there, and he actually said in their organization, so we all have like your sales and marketing teams define the ICP typically, right? For them, the customer success team defines what's the ICP and gives a questionnaire which the sales team needs to work on to qualify, hey, is this a customer we can take and make successful or not, right? So they've identified the pattern through the customer success journeys. So now after doing a few, they know that these are the kind of customers who we can make most successful. These are the kind of customers who are going to fail with us. So sales is happy to sell to everyone and bring them in, but that needs to be stopped, right? So they put this sort of qualification criteria which comes from the success team ahead of sales, so that sales can't just bring anyone in. CS needs to say, yes, we can take this customer and make them successful.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think we're at time. So thank you so much, Shri, for being here. Both Shri, actually, but mostly Shri Ganesan for, this was really an amazing talk. Like, just loved all the insights. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much, Gwen. Happy to be part of your community and contribute.
Thanks, Sri.
And nice to meet you, another Shri. Thank you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Clearly a lot of Sris here, so I changed my name to Ram.
Shri, I'm curious, what is the product? Rocketlane. What
So,
do you do?
Yeah, think of it as a purpose-built project collaboration, document collaboration, and communication platform, which helps in customer-facing projects. Like if you have a repeatable customer-facing project, like an onboarding project, you can run it on Rocketlane. It has templating. It has like a way to invite your customer into your project and make it easy for them to sort of see the status of things, update things on a ongoing basis in a very easy way, right? So it's like Asana plus Google Docs plus Slack, but built for customer-facing projects.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can clearly see a need for that. And, we have a bunch of spreadsheets at Confluent to do that. So I do think it'll help. Thanks a lot, Sri.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, folks.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.